Right, so thank you. Welcome, everybody. My name is Jeff Burstein. I am CEO of Advanced Enterprise Agility and one of the founding members of the Learning Educational Adaptive Framework. This is our, for LEAF, the Leadership Retreat is a community of practice that was just stood up today. Today is our first session. We're going to be meeting every month on the third Friday of the month. Thank you, Andy, for reminding me that it's not the last Friday of the month, and it is indeed the third Friday of the month. And the general intention is to just make available some of the common practices that leaders in education, some of the common practices that they're now trying to introduce some of these adaptive leader skills, capabilities, and competencies that have really migrated from industry, the work that Andy and I have done for years, working with leaders in IT and across multiple segments within industry and within organizations, working across the various operational groups that they have and helping them learn these adaptive ways of working. Today, what I'm going to be talking about are the three core competencies that every adaptive leader really should be focusing on developing, kind of talking about the critical role they play, why they're so important in today's day and age when we are, focusing on, how do we deal with complex and adaptive changing world, and where we're always addressing and facing new challenges. In today's conversation, and it won't be long, it's usually these conversations will, when we kick off a, one of these communities of practice, we'll start with something to learn something new, but generally they'll be short, about 15-20 minutes. But in today's, I'm going to be talking about, again, like I said, the three core competencies. One is the ability for leaders to flow purpose to their teams. One is the ability for leaders to actually map the flow of value, and we'll talk about the different types of value that we're specifically talking about here. And then lastly, it's the ability to visualize the flow of work, both from a process and where the work actually stands within that process, and the benefits that these three competencies actually provide back to leaders. I do, if you have at any point, if anybody has any questions, please feel free to interrupt me. Don't raise your hand because I generally don't look at the screen that has where everybody is. So just start talking over me and I'll stop, hopefully. But Andy, maybe if you'll keep an eye out on the chat for me, if anybody throws anything in the chat, I would appreciate that. And if anybody raises their hand, you can also call on me to stop. All right, so
got your back.
Thank you very much. So when we talk about the flow of purpose, it's, it is important to understand the role that purpose plays when we talk about knowledge workers. And so even to back that up, one step back, in today's digital economy, we've identified a new type of worker, one where on any given day, week, or month, they might be facing a new challenge, something they've never done before. It requires them to tap into, past experiences, maybe collaborate with people who come from, different backgrounds, who've had different experiences, and then pull together some of those really high level, what we call executive functioning skills, critical thinking, systems thinking, process improvement, right? Experimentation, design, all of those things, versus what we call a rote worker, which is, the type of worker who might show up and do the exact same thing every day, and there's little variation in what is expected of them. Generally, you might be talking about a factory worker, but even in today's factories, because of the use of automation, we notice there's an increase of the factory worker needing to be more of a knowledge worker over being a rote worker. There has been a lot of research done on, what it takes to actually unlock motivation within this, within this group called knowledge workers. And it's been done through multiple lenses. And if anybody's interested, I can share out. RSA put out a great video years ago that really talks about it. but it has been researched through multiple lenses, like through the sociology and psychology lenses, through the economic lens, through the educational lens, right? A lot of different factors were looked at it, and all of them really came to the same conclusion that there are three main components to unlocking motivation in knowledge workers, and it all starts with the ability to transfer over purpose, right? To get your workers and your teams really tied into the who are we doing this for? What is it that they're struggling with? And why is it so important that we're doing this versus any of the other things that we could possibly be doing? And it's when leaders are effectively, and they're adept at actually handing over purpose to their teams, that all they really have to at that point do is say, okay, well, let me know what tools you need to be successful. If there's any knowledge or things that you might need training, I can helpful gladly get that arranged for you, or solve any problems that as teams you can't solve for yourself because it's beyond your influence. And then that last cornerstone of unlocking the motivation of knowledge workers is just learning how to let your team self-organize and get themselves towards the direction. But again, it really does start with that ability to flow out purpose to the teams, because that will for them allow them to trigger that internal intrinsic motivator and unlock it themselves. Any questions before I go on? Okay. So next we're gonna talk about the competency of being able to map the flow of value. But before we do, let's distinguish two types of value. There's internal value. Every school, every organization, right, any entity that is a legal entity has internal groups that at times you act as customers. The finance group, the marketing group, admissions, it could be registration, whoever. They are internal customers, and they have needs from other parts of the organization, and there are processes that help flow that need, that value to them. And those are simply internal customers, and we generally call those internal process flows. The other type of value flow that we talk about mapping is one that is external facing, one that is a customer value stream. Right. So within the context of education, we're talking about students, we're talking about the community, parents, for higher education, you may be even talking about corporate partners that you have who are external customers who are going to be deriving some sort of value, from the institution, and all the people that are involved, all the tasks and activities that take place along the way, and all the tools that are used to flow that value to the customers. That's what we call a value stream map, right? And the ability to visualize those really does, for a leader, right, allow them to, again, tap into what they have access to, which are knowledge workers, who can then look at aspects of those particular value flows, identify aspects of them where maybe the customer's experience is less than ideal, or maybe the internal customer waits too long, or missed something happened, there was an event, right? And therefore we need to look at how do we improve this process. The ability to map it and visualize it, to track the people, the tools, right, and the activities that take place, right, all along the way are key. And so the way we do that, right, is, first we got to understand who is it that's getting served this value, and what is it, the value that's being served, right? So if we take, for example, an admissions process, an admissions process has a customer. This is an external facing customer, right? We have potentially new families coming to our school, right? And it starts with a trigger event with, hey, we reached out and we'd like to set up a school tour, right? So who are the people, what tools, what starts happening at that point? And then what happens next? Oh, well, we have to trigger out an application. Was it sent? Who follows up with the family? Do all those things. And as the families themselves flow through this stream of value, they might reach a divergent point. Like, here's where we diverge. Some parents are going to go down the right path, which, hey, look, we are fortunate enough that we can afford to, pay full tuition for our student, for our child to go to this school that we want them to. And so we're going to head down the general path. And that's going to be a very, streamlined path that quickly is going to get us to, hey, we're going to be requesting the school records for your child. It's usually going to involve things like a child visit and finding child fit and those kind of things. Right. But then you have other parents who are going to diverge for, whatever reasons they cannot afford to pay the full tuition. So they may need a little help. So they're going to head down the path and they're going to get their aid. They're going to wait determination. Then they're going to do their child visit and fit. And then everybody's going to reconverge back at we're waiting for records. Then we're on the wait list. And it ends with our ending event, which is, hey, the family is now ready, and we need to transfer them into the front office for everything that happens at that point, right? So every single one of these value flows is going to start with some trigger event. This is what kicks off all the people doing all the things with all the tools every step of the way, as if it's a customer, as they flow to that final value. If it's an internal customer, then that thing that they are waiting for, it is now handed over to them, and now they have that value, and everybody can get on with the rest of their day. And then it ends with that final event where now this has gone ahead and completes our flow of value, and now the customer is satisfied. And it's the ability to put this down visually, to track how long does it take, what are their handoffs, right? How do we identify the pain points for the customers? How do we identify improvement opportunities? How can we test? Using a visual model like this is a key competency that is going to help adaptive leaders go ahead and tap into that, that creative thinking that knowledge workers bring to every organization. Okay. So the last competency that we're going to talk about is the ability to go ahead and visualize the flow of work. And so when we talk about it within the context of adaptive leaders, within the context of the L-EAF Agile framework, right, what we're really talking about is how do we manage the flow from leadership, which is at the center, all the way out to the teams, where now they have that information, and what they're doing is they're tactically acting on it, and they are delivering value back into leadership or the customers. And it can be done, multiple ways. We have many institutions that we work with. They'll have, some sort of shared visual workspace where everybody can get together and make sure that, hey, the things we're working on, they're the right things. How do we know? Well, we know they're the right things because, we see them linked up to our strategy, right? And since we've deconstructed our long-term strategic, objectives into smaller, shorter, nearer term strategic goals, right? And we have, engaged with our teams to go ahead and make sure that they understand the purpose and the who and the what and the why behind that strategy, right? As we start to identify those first top level, high level tactical moves that as an organization, as an institute we want to take, that is there that we hand it over to the teams, and they start to pull it down to their own individual workflow boards, where they'll then manage the work and get the work done, delivering that tactical value back up through the chain, back up through the goals, and then through the objectives, to go ahead and deliver ultimately on the strategic vision and mission of leadership as laid out initially through the purpose. And the net result of being able to go ahead and map the flow of your work as it works, as it flows through your various working cycles, be they every quarter, every month, every couple of weeks, right? If you're going to nest those kind of working cycles, What you end up with is an environment where your stress is just reduced because everybody knows what's going on, right? You have maintained alignment because all the way down from the bottom of the tactical work that's starting to be done and pulled by the teams, it is going to be visually connected right here in a shared space where we can all see that the work is aligned. Right? So it makes the maintaining of alignments easier. And then lastly, now we have a shared workspace where we can come and the tool itself, the visual workspace itself, actually communicates a lot of the information that most leaders struggle with, which is, hey, where are we in the, oh, well, let me look at the tool. Oh, I see you're working on that thing right now. It is currently in collaboration. And I've noticed that, every 2-3 weeks, you're getting stuff done. So if it's in collaboration now, I would expect it to be done at the end of this cycle, or if not, the end of the next cycle, right? So you have that visual communication of where the team is, what it is they're actively engaged with, how aligned it is with the overall strategy, right? Which helps to kind of reduce that overall cognitive load. And so those are the primary 3 core competencies that we really do focus on in the Adaptive Leaders Workshop Series. And so at this point, I will just kind of open it up to questions.
There's a lot there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's start with a hypothetical. No, there is chaos going on, and there's no mapping. Do you have to get sort of that? You had that chart, the flow chart. Do you have to get it right before you get started?
So that's a great question. And actually the encouragement is it's so first of all, we would caution right and wrong are very subjective, but irrespective, what we would say is it's not about getting it right. It's about let's start by mapping what you currently have as best you identify it. One of the things that I've experienced in doing this with leaders over the last 15 years or so is that they believe that their organizational systems and processes flow a certain way, but when they actually go to measure them and talk to the people who run them, they find out that that's not the way we thought it worked, right? Because slowly over time, the people closest to the problem are going, oh yeah, that's just not working for us. When we're doing this awaiting determination, we used to do this, and this, but it just wasn't working, and we changed it. And so the intention and what I would encourage as your first pass is, as best you can, try to map what that current flow looks like so that you can begin the process of measuring and start to identify where it's even worth exploring improvement opportunities.
Thanks.
Welcome, Jessica. Welcome, Simon.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for this presentation, Jeff. There's so much great information in here, and I like the defining of the competencies as a great framework to work from. So you can really sort and have purpose in what you're doing, and help with this leadership flow.
Mm-hmm. So I know, Jessica, as a leader, the leader that you are, one of the things you've done with your teams is you focused on the 3rd competency, right? Visualizing and mapping out the flow of work, right? I wonder if you wouldn't mind maybe, just kind of talking through what that journey was, what some of the things you maybe observed, and maybe what some of the maybe hopeful or intended and unexpected outcomes that you've seen from working with your teams in this way.
So thank you. So I'm the chief academic officer of an online asynchronous high school, which has a whole lot of things to go into it. in terms of leadership. So I'm not the CEO of a company, and I don't have control of value stream mapping. I have control of my department and how we can work better together. It just so happens it's the academics department of a high school. So it's pretty large, and there's a lot of things to be done. Most things flow through an academics department. When I took over the department, there was, they kind of clean slated it. So we had to build out the whole department top down. And that included reshuffling of faculty and things like that. And in that, it was just trying to get a hold of what work was expected of us, what the processes were, and then where that was going to be designated, which team member that was going to fall on, without overwhelming one team member more than the other. And so after assembling the team, we came to the point where we adopted a Kanban system in Kanban Zone, which was really effective because we could color code it, because we could create a backlog, because we had a shared space of communication that didn't require us to sit on meetings. It opened the lines of communication, and it helped us see data. And that was a really important thing. So, I am very lucky that I'm working from home, but as I talk, you're going to hear my Teams go off 7,000 times because I'm in constant contact with everyone else in the company. I have an assistant that's in office, so the phone's ringing all the time with parents and with student questions and admission questions and things like that. And then I have someone else that's working mostly on curriculum and tech issues. So how do we keep ourselves aligned is really important, because on a board that looks similar to this, ours is a little bit more simplified, but we've color coded out all the tasks that we do. And at first, that was really just the main step in being able to show my bosses what we were seeing, like what was coming through our department, because no one else in the company really understood what came under academics. And so the first step in this visual flow was just showing how many tasks are being processed by by only one department every single week, and then how quickly we were moving. And then one of the other things I really like with Kanban Zone, and you can get this in a variety of tools, but I just know Kanban Zone well because we use it, is that when a card is in any lane, you can collect data on how long it's there. So we were able to look at our systems and say, wow, this report takes 3 hours to do every week. Let's dig into this report, because at max we want it to take an hour. And so we could really see where we were wasting time, when there was just extra manpower being used in the system that should be allocated in better ways, and drilling down into it. And that was incredibly important to get us up and running into being an efficient academics system, because especially in education, and I say that because I've been in education my whole life, but there's a lot of, and I'm sure this is in other businesses, but a lot of, well, this is the way it's done, so it's just done this way. And that's not really acceptable now that you have automation, and now that you have different tools. And really, you should, as an effective leader, be questioning everything, and not to make people uncomfortable, but to say, listen, do you really want to spend 3 hours of your work week doing that one report? I bet if we made small shifts, we could figure out, and within weeks of adopting this system, we could really see our flow. So how many cards were coming from backlog all the way to done, what our completion rate was. It turns out it was higher than all the other departments, which I was particularly proud of. But then, how can we use that data to show the executives of the company that are not necessarily in the day-to-day work slog with us, where we resources, and not just say, oh my goodness, we're so overwhelmed, we need resources. Everyone petitions their boss for more money, or another person, or more resources, but actually have the data to say, here's how much work is coming through, here's how many hours a week it's taking. You can see that all of us are working 5-10 hours beyond what our workload is. This is going to lead to burnout. How do we have that discussion? And so it's not an I want conversation, and it's not an I feel conversation, and it's not an emotional conversation. It's a hard data conversation that you can have, and that goes up and down, because as I look forward and want to bring my faculty in, it's going to lead to those kinds of conversations with faculty as well, as what are you spending your time on? is there too much on your plate? I think that's very important in terms of any organization, but particularly schools, is that work just kind of gets pushed around and we don't realize how much is on each person's plate. But this system really allows you to see how much work is on each person's plate and say, maybe you don't need that meeting, or maybe that paperwork should be done by a different level, or maybe we just need to hire a paperwork person, even if they're per diem, or, like it helps you think outside of the box instead of just saying like, oh, well, it has to be done. Somebody has to do it. And then you're leading to burnout and you're leaving valuable people that are leading your organization. So I hope I answered that, Jeff.
I believe you did, and I see Andy, you have your hand up.
Thank you for that, Jess. Um, so you start with where you're at, you begin to visualize it, you collect data, and it begins to show opportunities for improvement.
Mhm.
I'm guessing there's no shortage of opportunities for improvement. There's no end to what you can fix. How have you approached prioritizing that near infinite list of, well, we could fix that, we could fix that, we could fix, I mean, how do you solve the most impactful next problem, which then exposes the next one and the next one? But how do you know where to start and make the argument for, here, I need to fix this? Not going to fix everything, but when there's 10 things, how do you fix the one and say no to 9? What's been your approach?
That's a really good question. It really comes down to us. When we inherited our department, it was just a very tangled mess. It was just building out systems to begin with. And it was what is, excuse me, the most important in terms of running the business and the most important in stakeholder return. So like, what's the best for our students? So as an educational institution, we're looking at how do we thrive as a business, but also how do we make sure that we're keeping the integrity of our academics in place at the same time and making sure that our students are receiving a great education. So a lot of that goes into the decision making of our stakeholders in terms of our customers and our business needs, and protecting. I have a really great team, so as a leader, my main job is to protect my team as well. So I need to deliver to my students, but I need to make sure that my team is not being burnt out, because if I lost one of them, I would be lost. And so going back and forth on that, but the board really leads to transparency of conversation. So I can say to my team, okay, we have all these cards on the board. Who needs help with what? What can we put down? And it's easy to have that conversation, and a quick conversation instead of a 3-hour conversation of saying like, I see all these things. This one's taking the most. What do we see? And then rating that feedback in terms of how much does it deliver for the student and how much does it deliver for the team member. And that's how we've been able to move through it. And of course, you're right, Andy. I have a to-do list. It's 1,000,000 miles long. I have projects to do into 2025. So, it's never ending in education. And then something always pops up and bumps all of them back anyway, like this. 2 weeks ago, all of my students found a humanizer in AI, and it screwed up all of my detection systems. And so everything got put on hold, and we went, now we have to figure out how to scan for humanizers. So in education, when you deal with kids, there's always going to be bumps, right? But this helps you keep track of things so things don't get lost and they don't fall off the table. And then a year later, you're like, oh, I didn't do that. And it also helps chunk that work. So I can say, this was our initiative. We have to put this on hold for a minute, but you can continue on this part of the initiative while I work on this problem that just popped up, and then I'll meet you back here, because we're able to keep track and communication of what's going on within the visual system.
Mm-hmm. And then from a competency standpoint, Andy, the way I would add on to that is that, it touches back to that first competency of purpose. So one of the tools that we use when in training leaders on how to do purpose to maintain alignment, so that we're prioritizing the things that are the things to be prioritized. It's going to stem from that, what is the purpose? What is the highest purpose? Right? Because we should be able to identify, oh, that's going to help us achieve this versus that's going to help us achieve this other thing. Which of those do we think is more critical at this point in time? And so this is a product vision or a strategy vision board that we use that really does, for the leader, help to really clarify that, and for their teams helps to make sure that everybody is thinking about, oh yeah, this is the thing that we're focused on right now as our vision over whatever that planning horizon is, and it is adaptable and flexible, right? So you can do near term, you can do far term. But then saying, okay, well, if that is truly the thing that we all are aligned on, and this is how we got there, this is the conversation, and it does evolve over time, then it is likely that this is our highest priority, right?
It can be a struggle. Mary, I'm curious. So I heard Jessica mention like three, I guess they're business goals or values: employee engagement, you can't lose employees, student outcomes, and stakeholder outcomes. I'm curious, in your context, um, what is the North Star? What is the lighthouse that you're striving for?
Well,
And
we really,
are all your stakeholders aligned, and do they agree with you?
we really struggle with some of the issues that Jessica mentioned, like this is how it's always been done. So we're going to continue to do it this way, no matter how many hours it takes or whether it's wasteful. For example, we have on Wednesdays is like meeting day. And so people have meetings for 5 hours in a row on that day. It's really not an effective practice, right? But that's how we've always done it. So that's how we're always going to do it. I think mapping things out would really help us a lot. We're in a union environment. So there is some tension between administration and faculty at times. And it would be helpful, I think, if faculty like myself just kind of get on board, we organize our department chairs and start mapping out these processes and do it from the ground up instead of top down. I don't think top down adoption would work in my environment. But yeah, I definitely, some of the things that Jessica mentioned are things that we struggle with as well. Even though I'm in higher ed, those problems with, and how do we make sure that the workflow is adjusted to each person so we aren't just pushing something onto somebody else's plate. That's a real struggle.
Can I add, Mary? I've seen this work because I started this way. I started as faculty and then moved, but I did this in faculty teams first. And first I did it with students, and then I moved it up as a department head to faculty. And when you're modeling it and you have buy-in from your department, then it spreads because people start to see that you have free time or that you're drinking coffee on Wednesday and you're not so stressed and you're not hoarse. So it's almost like that wildfire approach. But you just have to start it with a small group that has buy-in, that goes like, you know what, I would like to see, I want to see how much work I do in a week. I want to see what these processes actually look like. And there's a great buy-in to that of let's show everyone else what we accomplish as a department, because no one sees all the things that we accomplish every week and all the tasks that go into what it takes to be faculty or department head or whatever that role is. And then when other people start to see it, they go, oh, I do that much work too. And, it starts to bubble up from there, and then it can start to climb slowly. And sometimes it climbs and sometimes it doesn't. It depends on the climate of the company or the educational institution. But I have seen it work in different levels of education successfully.
I love that you share it after you've got some traction, with the hope not that people copy you, but they learn from it. And then those neighboring places that you have interactions with, like, oh, I had no idea me dumping it over the wall to you caused this disturbance. And then you get a scaling impact of these potential changes across the institution. I love that, sharing and then building of alliances.
And that is ultimately the purpose of the community of practice as well, right? Is finding out what others are doing and how others are where others are struggling, and and so on and so forth. So I'm curious, Jessica, you've put in a lot of work onto the visualizing of the workflow, and you've mentioned that you don't own any of the value flows because of where you are in the organization. I wonder if you were to look within because you said it's accreditation, right? So if you were to look within the accreditation, is there within accreditation any of the, value flows that it might be worked? Because within accreditation, almost, and maybe it is an erroneous assumption, you have influence over how it gets done. So I wonder if there's any interest, any value, any curiosity in trying something, let's say, internally to your group when it comes to value flow.
There definitely is, because I'm given a budget and I have to monitor that budget and go from there. And as you can imagine, in all businesses, again, but especially in education where everything's changing so rapidly, is that things just pop up out of nowhere and you need to shift your whole the whole scope of what you're looking at. I had no plans at the beginning of the year to place AI in all of my courses, and now I have a bot coming into every one of my courses to tutor my students and provide bilingual classes, and I didn't anticipate that in January. So where does that come from? So a lot of these things can be brought down into department level. I know that with my department last year, we were just forming, as I mentioned, and this year I'm putting them through a strategic planning, again, in the same tool, all visually, but we need to strategically plan. I can't make my bosses strategically plan, but I can make my department strategically plan. And so we can set out our initiatives and say, this is what we really want to accomplish this year. Let's define what our objectives are. Let's break them into goals, and let's break them into tasks so we can figure out how we can accomplish our goals within this next year, and not drive ourselves crazy and still do the day-to-day work that takes of running a school. But we're into there's a belief now that we've instituted this visual tracking system that we can improve things. So before it was like, well, we come into this company that's already established and the workflow is what it is. It is what it is. But we've seen that we can change it now. And now all of our lives are a million times better than they were last June. We're not nearly as busy. We're not nearly as tied up. We're not all doing point and click manual labor. It's at a certain point, it's ridiculous at your pay grade to be like clicking all day, and we've refined so many of those systems. So we see that we can use these tools and leverage our collective intelligence and our transparency and communication through these boards to make improvements. So now we are setting our sight on, instead of trying to climb this massive hill of learn the company and learn the culture and get into it, but now, like, what are the actual goals now we know the customers, now we know the bosses, now we know everyone in the team. How do we take that information and put it into our strategic planning? And so that's what we're doing now over the summer, so we can hit into the fall and say, our goals for faculty are this, our goals for engagement are this, our goals for whatever we're going to do next is this. And then we have a thorough plan. So when these things pop up or the day-to-day things come in, we can look at the strategic plan and we already have a plan for how we're going to deal with it. It's not let's stop and discuss everything. We go like, okay, well, this already aligns to this objective, so we kind of know how we're going to handle it. And then we just have to build out the day-to-day system, which is much easier than it sounds when you have the structure created to just insert something new.
Mm-hmm.
What are you currently measuring, qualitative and quantitatively, as feedback loops for these experiments?
So in terms of the running of my team, I'm using my Kanban board analytics to show how fast we're moving work and what, the process part of it, of how long work is taking, and then, how we can refine things like that. Qualitatively is the feedback from our students. And so we have surveys attached to our courses. We have outreach initiatives. So things like that is where or even just phone calls and emails that we get from our students. We just had a major graduation ceremony and had a higher turnout than we've ever had in the history of the company. So we're seeing qualitatively that feedback from our students and from our clients. And then quantitatively, we're kind of working on just our own processes and systems on that end. But we can see a direct correlation between the two, because as our service gets more efficient and better, we can concentrate on the quality of the educational experience instead of being dragged down by paperwork. And not having the time to refresh our courses or add new fun things or explore new ed tech, those kinds of things.
Hmm. It's interesting. And I wonder, as you were talking about it, I was thinking, I wonder what the impact might be, maybe, Mary or Jessica, you can speculate, like what would be the impact of, these new AI tools, not only on the students, but now on how, like, the internal institution itself is now organized, running and operating, and what kind of a disruption that may introduce, unless we're able to tap into any combination of this to kind of make sure that people are aligned.
Well, I see AI as taking away a lot of the grunt work that faculty and teachers are doing. For example, I've been using it to generate case studies for my courses. And I used to sit there and kind of painfully write each case myself. Well, now with AI, I can give a prompt, generate a case, just refine it. I can make cases for every single student in the class if I want. We're thinking about AI very narrowly as faculty, sometimes saying, oh, students are going to use it to cheat. But you can actually use it to generate a custom problem set, whether it's a math class, a programming class, business cases for each student. So then there's really no way they could cheat, right? They have to engage and share their problems with the other students and work collaboratively. So I see it as being a real game changer for us, and we need to restructure our workflow so that we're actually using it and enabling faculty to use it, as opposed to just saying that's off the table, that's plagiarism, it's academic fraud, because it's not. If I'm putting in the prompt, I'm using it as a tool just like I would any other development tool that I use for software development, and then I'm refining what's generated. It's making me more productive. So why would I leave that off the table, right?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, as you were saying that, I was thinking that, think about it from the ability to test code, right? As a developer, it's going to take you time to run different use cases against your code, but you give your code to the AI, you give it the spectrum of use cases, probably do it a lot faster.
Oh, absolutely. You can generate unit tests against your code. I used to be a software engineer before I was a faculty member. So
that explains all this.
yes. So you can generate use cases against or test cases against your code, which is really nice because unit testing can take so long.
Yeah.
And from a faculty perspective, it's cool because you can now create unit tests against little programming problems that you've developed for the students,
Mhm.
and then just let them have at it. And they can run the unit test to see if their answer is correct or not, as opposed to you just manually slogging through, many, many, many files of code. And it gives the student instant feedback, which we know from a pedagogical standpoint is much more effective than having them turn in an assignment and waiting for a week or two to get that feedback from their instructor.
Mm-hmm. Jessica, is there anything you were going to add?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was just going to say, the AI, first of all, I think we just need to just change the mindset around it. Is again, it's not a cheating tool, but it's a way to help faculty remove something from their plate, right? And so, but it just takes a little bit of creativity and breaking out of that, well, it's the way we've always done it box. And it's not necessarily cheating because it's a tool now that's widely available to everyone. So like, we might have thought about if we were several decades ago, our calculators cheating in math. Well, no, now they're a widely available tool. So we have to just adapt to the fact that they're a widely available tool and move forward. And so the things that I'm working on in my school is, have you open up ChatGPT, have a conversation with George Washington about his first years as presidency. And you have to give me the prompt questions, and you need to give me his answers, and then you need to go fact check his answers because they phantom answers. So like that is critical thinking that is beyond write an essay about George Washington's first term as president. You can, you could do that. There's no transformation. There's no synthesis in your learning when you're doing that, really, because you read it and then like there's a little paraphrasing, but it's not, you're like, it was 1789. It was dark and depressing. George Washington was a good president. You don't really get to know it. But now you're having a conversation with George Washington, and then you need to fact check it to make sure that it's right. That's a lot more higher order thinking. The other thing we were looking at is in English, which is really a sore spot, especially for me, because I can't do oral exams because we're not live, is what if ChatGPT wrote your essay, but then you had to create a video where you explain where your thesis is, you explain where your evidence is, like you go through and you actually explain the essay to the instructor. So, you might not be writing that essay, or you might write it in pieces. We were breaking it down into flow charts and concept charts, things that AI can't do right now. I don't know how long that'll last, but things to break down so we're seeing ways thoughts are flowing to build these conclusions instead of just saying the 5-paragraph essay is it, and then have it generate that and then fix it, or have it generate something and then go back and make it better. You make it better in a different font, and then we can see that higher order thinking. So I think it's just taking, in some ways it's taking work off of a teacher's plate, and in other ways it's adding a little bit more to ensuring that there's that higher order thinking levels for students. That's going to take a little bit more time for faculty, and it's just that shift in mindset of where do you actually want to spend your time. And I know as growing up in education, I really don't have work outside of education. The whole reason I became an educator was light bulb moments. It clearly wasn't the pay. It wasn't the fact that I got to fill out IEP forms. It wasn't that I love going to faculty meetings. It was that you get these aha moments. And so the AI is taking those manual tasks away for you and allowing you to have a lot more freedom in those aha moments. And I think if educators really understood that that gap they need to go through, that shift, it would be embraced a lot more, and there would be a lot more enthusiasm about what AI can do. Plus, this is the tool our kids need to thrive in the future. They need it on their resume. We can't ignore it. We can't say, well, you just don't get to use that. Write your paper in a pencil because that's the way we want you to do it, because they're not going to go to a job where they pick up a pencil. They're going to go to a job where they have to prompt AI for ideas. So what better way to do it than to be asking Nelson Mandela about apartheid in South Africa, or Gandhi about what it's like to fight for independence in India? Learn how to question by engaging the AI, and then you come out a better critical thinker and problem solver at the end, and you learn something about the world. Why not?
I love that. I love that approach, Jessica. You talk about light bulb moments, and it's a huge light bulb moment for me. I have my youngest daughter's 23, 24, and she's dropped into a think tank with PhDs, and they keep giving her things to do, and she's like, "Dad, I'm an imposter. Why the fuck did they hire me?" I'm like, you have mentors, go talk to them. And she talks to them, and they say, well, just use chat. She's so against it because she grew up in a world where you learned yourself. And so your approach is giving me seeds of thought to share with her, who's been resistant, because she's a singer, a songwriter, a creative thinker, and also in this world of looking at complex um, healthcare related social issues up in Canada, in deserts of medical care. and trying to help policy direction. Like, this feels like cheating. I'm not going to use it to write a song. I'm not going to use it to create images or music or do my programming. But I love this approach of, it's no different than the calculator you used in high school physics, or the dictionary, or the spell checking, or the thesaurus. Don't take it as truth, but make it as a conversation to improve your understanding and your knowledge. Otherwise, you're right. It falls into a crutch, and it's giving you made up bullshit answers that you're like, well, I found it on the interweb. It must be true. Whereas,
Yeah, well, art is art. I would never say use AI for art, but it's not bad for brainstorming. I have a 9-year-old, and he wants to write, but he refuses to revise. So he writes me a paragraph and he goes, "It's done." And I go, "It's not done. I can't publish that." And he goes, "But it's done." And I go, "Well, it's not. I'm not publishing it." And we go back and forth like this. So I said to him, "Go use ChatGPT and write a story." And so he went in and he put all the elements and he put all the descriptions and all the things that he wanted in, and ChatGPT wrote a five chapter story. So I said, "Okay, read it through now and now print it out." So now he prints it out. So now I go through and I go, "This story is not great. It needs personality. So I need you to go through and I need you to write dialogue." So now he's going through with a pen and he's writing in dialogue. And then the next thing I'm going to have him do is write in, emotion, like, how do you feel? And then he's going to use ChatGPT to find adjectives to do that. So like, it got him past that bump of my one paragraph is fine, mom, print it into a book, I want to be an author, to like, oh, now he's going through the writing process, but he doesn't think he is. But but he's doing it, and at the end, if he follows through, mind you, he's 9, he'll have something that he actually wrote and that ChatGPT didn't. It's almost like, generating an outline and following that outline. But he's building the skill, and we need to see it as building the skill, because no matter how great you are at anything, you could always be better in a skill.
Sure.
So define that skill and then see how it can be helpful in tutoring you in that skill.
And so that's a great example, Jessica, of 2 of those adaptive leadership capabilities or competencies. The purpose we were able to give, is it Luke?
This is Charlie. Yeah.
Charlie. So, you're able to give Charlie purpose behind using the GTP to write a bigger story, right? And then you have in your mind, oh, I'm going to every day flow him through the next step. So you've got a value flow that you're kind of, he don't need to see it, but he's following it, right? And he's using the GTP all along the way. And so that's a great example. All right,
purpose is so essential. So it's like, it's the buy-in for everything, and it doesn't matter if it's business or leadership or education. And I think that's a lot of what's wrong with education, or even some businesses now, is that there's no purpose to what you're asking students to flow through. So you're giving them these tasks, but they're not connected and they're not flowing. And it's the same thing with a team. If I said to my team, "We're redoing this procedure," and they said, "Why?" And I said, "I don't know, it seems nice," no one would do it with me and
Right.
slog in and do the extra hours and do the extra research and pull all that information towards them, because they would not have purpose. So everything has to be framed in purpose. And so to kind of connect back to what you asked later, how do I prioritize? It's about where do you see the highest level of purpose? And so that comes in separate places. I don't know if I said that correctly last time, but it comes in separate places. It comes from my employees and it comes from student value, but it's purpose. What is the purpose of redoing this? It's going to make you happier. It's going to make them happier. Then that's the top of our priority list.
Right. And the flip side of that is thinking back to something that we've all said already, in the conversation, which is, what's the purpose behind we've always done it that way? And how does that impact us? How does that impact who's receiving, if they're ever going to receive that value? Right. So that was awesome. So thank you for that. All right. So this is the community of practice. This is what we do. We help each other. We talk to each other, right? We talk about the common practices that we use. Each month, we're going to ask, somebody else to present something, so it's not just always me, because that'll get boring to me and likely you really, really quickly. So, please, and invite friends, because you have friends who are in, while you may not be at the pinnacle of leadership in your organization, you do generally sit in a position, and anybody can sit and, assume the mantle of leadership. And we will always distinguish, managers and bosses from leaders. But with that, as we move into the world of, really having to rely on adaptive leaders because the context in which they're leading is changing on a daily basis, I certainly hope that, thinking about these 3 core competencies and how you might start, looking at applying some of them, it was at least in some way, remotely helpful. So thank you all, and certainly hope to see you and a lot more people on the 3rd Friday of July. Have a wonderful day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.